Welcome back from the break. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. Our big story this hour with the COVID cases surging in the national capital. Several neighbouring states such as Punjab and Uttarakhand, apart from, of course, Uttar Pradesh, are going to polls. The Election Commission has been holding several deliberations with the Health Ministry and political parties. While democratic processes such as elections cannot be stalled for years, it's also true that social distancing cannot be maintained at election rallies. In this broadcast, we've put together a list of suggestions which the EC can look into. These suggestions include setting up of a permanent scientific advisory body of doctors and experts, applying an 8-month surge gap model in planning polls. In fact, we have on this broadcast a set of experts to understand the complexity of the issue and the possible workable solutions to ensure neither democratic processes are stalled nor COVID norms flouted. Let's quickly go across to our guests. We have Dr. N.K. Ganguly, former DG ICMR and scientist, joining us live. K. Sujata Rao, former Secretary of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, is joining us as well. Padma Shri Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, Chairman and MD Nephron, joins us live. Dr. Sanjay Singh, Chief Coordinator UP ADR, is also live with us. Kabir Srivastav, Delhi High Court lawyer, is also joining the broadcast. Dr. Ganguly, let me begin with you first. Now, we're seeing restrictions begin in areas such as Delhi and Maharashtra, where the surge is the highest so far, although pretty manageable, but we don't know where this is headed. You know, in light of these restrictions, it's rather laughable when we look at our neighboring states and see huge get-togethers and, big political events take place. In this scenario, Dr. Ganguly, what needs to be done with the upcoming Vidhan Sabha elections and the ongoing political activities in the country, and particularly in the 5 Vidhan Sabha states which are going to polls?
Actually, if we want to take precautions and put in appropriate preventive measures, we have to learn from the global experience also. It is a global pandemic. At the moment, yesterday, there were 256,000 cases in the United States, more than 150,000 cases in France alone. All these countries have, at least when Europe has been immunized very well. They have got, some of them have got boosters also. The New York City, which is showing rise, has been well vaccinated. The many places which are well vaccinated, they are getting this surge. And hence, vaccination doesn't prevent the infection. It is milder infection, but children are getting infected. So what we are getting from United States, that where 20 per children were in the ICUs, now there are 45 children in ICUs. The problem is that healthcare workers are getting infected in large numbers, so military has been called, as well as 1,500 flights today has been cancelled because the crew got infected. They were vaccinated, and the same is happening in the sports arena. So the major things which we should accompany all these measures are all COVID-related behavior, that avoiding large gatherings, avoid wearing mask in indoor situations and appropriate mask. It has come out that the N95 mask is the only mask which will prevent Omicron from spreading from one person to the another person. Although this is not doesn't affect serious infections, but in the vulnerables it affects serious infection. So now it is happening in India. Good news is in that South Africa it is coming down. UK, it is now showing a trend of coming down. So, but it doesn't respect herd immunity at all. If you get infected, you don't die. You don't go to intensive care. But the kind of herd immunity which we were thinking will save us is no longer operable over here from the infection. And it spreads from person to person. We have to also, with the COVID appropriate behavior, we will also have to enhance the diagnostics, because many people will not have symptoms, but will be infected and will be spreading the infections. In many countries, children from 5 to above are being immunized. In our country, governments have started taking steps and have suggested, but the community has to participate vigorously. If
Yep.
community doesn't participate, it doesn't happen. So I will end by saying that we need to have large community oriented programs, generate the trust of the community so that community understands and takes part on this. Our surveillance, data sharing, enhanced diagnostic uses, etc. All of these should be in place with all the COVID appropriate behavior which we are doing. Lockdowns are not any option anymore until unless we are forced to do that.
Okay. K. Sujata Rao, come in here. Now, is this advice that possibly should be given, by the Health Secretary to the Election Commission? We do believe a meeting took place just a couple of days ago. Is this advice that perhaps should be given, by the relevant Chief Secretaries of the 5 Vidhan Sabha states, looking at the COVID numbers, looking at the situation developing in each of these respective states? What's your take, K. Sujata Rao, on this big debate of, elections versus COVID protocol, which is bound to break out now, as we begin to see numbers rise? We saw this being debated before the West Bengal elections, and now we're seeing it again before the 5 upcoming state elections of UP, Punjab, Manipur, Goa, and Uttarakhand. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what I was saying was, that every prediction, every epidemiologist, every discussion seems to suggest that we are going in for a wave 3. And it is likely to peak around end of January, middle of February. So this time it is becoming a bit clear that, we have a new variant, which is also highly transmissible, and we cannot take chances. So our current data also seems to suggest that we are, increasing our number of caseloads. The point is that ideally, it would be wonderful if the elections could be postponed beyond April till such time that we get to know really where we stand in terms of the third wave and in terms of what's happening to the pandemic. Because there is another serious viewpoint also that this variant may actually be a good one in the sense of bringing the pandemic down to making it endemic due to spreading infection, but not causing hospitalization, not causing mortality, but it's spreading it so much so that there's a herd immunity possibility arising, and therefore it may well reduce the severity of the pandemic and make it endemic. So maybe the game will get over, according to this viewpoint, by end March, April, and then the situation stabilize. And so we will have an opportunity to be able to then revive our social and economic and political life. But then that has a risk that, this time you postpone an election because of pandemic, next time it could be for some other reason. And governments which don't want an election, which is not convenient to them, could always find an excuse for postponing an election. And the fundamental right of all of us is to hold our elections in time. So that being given if that is going to be the situation, and all political parties do not give their consent, and it's not based on full consensus, and the elections have to go through, then, I do have certain strong recommendations, which a health secretary may have already made to the Election Commission on how exactly to conduct the election and minimize the risk. Risk is not going to be ruled out because you cannot have an election in a closed door or a lockdown scenario. You will have to allow rallies. You will have to take the risk that infection may spread.
We'd love to hear some of those recommendations of yours, ma'am. If you can, I know perhaps you don't want to go into too much detail, but a couple of them, if you can just enlist, would be great, because we hope the relevant authorities are watching this broadcast and maybe they'll take note.
Okay. Well, very quickly, I would say 2 things, 2 or 3 points I would like to make because time is short. One is you can always ration out the rallies. There's no need for having so many public functions, but at the same time, you cannot say ban rallies because that's not a realistic assumption and is neither going to be enforced. It's not easy to enforce. So you ration out to all political parties equally 3 rallies in the election season or 4 in a particular state, something like that. And hopefully, if we can quickly do a zero surveillance in the states where we are going ahead with the elections, we will be able to identify the hotspots and the areas where the virulence of the infection is much more than in the lower areas. And perhaps that listing could help enable decision making to say where the rallies could be held and maybe whether, whether inoculations have been high, where the zero surveillance is showing a very positive trend of herd immunity and high antibody prevalence and so on. Those are areas maybe you could allow some rallies to be held in a rationed form in the non-hotspot areas. The second is encouraging door-to-door campaigning. And third is that media has to really be the game changer in this case, both print and televised media, which really must play fair and give every political party equal time slots, and equal visibility, so that, the campaigning is much more through media. I mean, other alternatives like postal ballot are there. But you know what happened in US and how Trump is carrying on with the election stolen only because of the postal ballot issue. And even in India, we are not so organized to allow a postal ballot. So what we do have is a mass media campaigns, and that could be done provided, and that's a big underlying lining I'd like to do, that there is fairness in the time slots given and the times, and the amount of exposure given to every political party equally. And I think that lastly would be that states must fund, it's much more expensive. That means the Election Commission must allow candidate expenditures to be doubled, because then they can spend much more money on pamphlets and posters and banners and advertise their things through that medium, which is very expensive today. And so they need to increase the candidate expenditure. And ideally, the state governments could also, the central government could also provide some funding support to the political parties to do much more reliance and rely much more on mass media channels of communication, rather than having these huge rallies that may help alleviate the situation a lot more.
Okay.
So these are some very quick thoughts. And finally, maybe you might even have to consider decreasing the number of people in a booth. Right now, it's, as you know, a booth for election booth is for 1,000 voters. Reduce it to 500, so you don't allow crowding in. You allow much more distance. And, it is also possible to give allotments, at the booth level. And I know it can be done because I've worked in elections, that in that colony, they can say this colony, people will come from 10 to 11. These people will come.
So stagger timings, and reduce people for each booth is what you're saying. Okay, I'll come back to you, ma'am. Let me quickly go across to Padma Shri Dr. Sanjeev Bagai as well. Dr. Bagai, is it a wise idea to perhaps postpone the elections till after the peak, of this new variant, of this new wave? We're being told the peak could come perhaps end of Jan, beginning Feb. Should the elections, the rallies be postponed till after that? Or would it not make much of a difference?
Good evening, Uday. Good evening, everyone. So I'll break my discussion in 3 quick parts. One is, it's important to understand this variant, what we are dealing with. I'm not going into the micro details, but the long and the short of this variant is that this is as transmissible, if not more in contagiousness, as measles. There have been modeling studies to show that in 20 days, measles patient can infect 225 people. And in 20 days, Omicron can infect more than 1.1 lakh. That's the spread potential of this virus. It may not be that much lethal as Delta. There have been 4 different studies worldwide to show 40 to 70% decreased lethality. But in intrinsic stratification, it is only 12 times lesser lethal than Delta. So it is lethal enough. With regards to the number of cases, this is unprecedented a country which has 1/20th to 1/40th the population of India, we are seeing more than 1 to 1.5 lakh cases per day. I'm not looking at even the extended collaboration of correlation of this in Indian population if it spreads. So obviously we are dealing with something which is extremely, extremely different. The reason why it is breaking through the infection, Vineet, is that the mutations in this virus is perpetually keeping the receptor binding protein, the main area which latches on to your ACE receptor, in an open up one position. It's a conformation position which the spike protein takes. So it is virtually impossible for the vaccines to work as well as they did for the alpha, gamma, beta, or delta. Now, that's the reason what we are seeing as vaccine escape or immune escape. Now come to what is happening with the change in the demographic profile of the disease infection. Omicron is causing 6 times more infection in children. US in the last 6 months, at the end of Delta and now beginning of Omicron, has seen 7.5 million children, 7.5 million children infected with Omicron. That's a huge number. 1 lakh have been infected in the last 7 days. The ICUs are bursting out of the seams. We can only learn from what we are already seeing internationally. We will be very naive and foolish to think it can't happen in India. And I don't think we should leave that to by chance. Now, with regards the election, I think it will be foolhardy to expect that the election will be postponed. So I'm not even discussing that because I think what is going to happen is going to happen. Let's try to see how we can do best if it happens. We can insist that people who come to vote have to be at least 2 vaccines done. That's a mandatory must. Even constitutionally, we can insist on that. Point number 2, for people who are coming, it can be staggered over more number of days, more number of centers, and rationalized in a staggered manner so that there is no overcrowding. The thing which we can use the most as screening protocols in large population is rapid antigen test. The old rapid antigen test of 2019 and 20 has evolved, and now it's giving a sensitivity and specificity, which is in fact matching RT-PCR. But the advantage with this test is it's quicker, faster, cheaper, 20 to 25 minutes report, and it gives you a pickup 1 to 1.5 days earlier than RT-PCR when you are at the infectious most. So we can actually pick up people who are potential carriers of this. So we can use the rapid antigen test at large. And last, most importantly, is political rallies can be deferred. If you have to go along with the elections, you can't have your cake and the icing and eat it yourself. I think political rallies can stop. Let the election go on. There is enough avenue in today's world through the electronic media, through the social platforms to campaign, to convey your message. But I think any election rally campaign or any gathering, so to say, be it religious, political, social, wedding, for any reason, is definitely going to be a super spread event. The attack rate of this virus is 87% plus. Do you want to escalate? I mean, it's bound to escalate. I will not even say, do you want to escalate? It's bound to escalate.
Okay.
Any rally at the present moment, last sentence, Vinny, any rally, any political gathering, any religious gathering at the present moment with this type of virus we are seeing is like carrying a huge mashal into an ammunition.
Okay.
Fight.
Any gatherings will be a super spreader, be it political, be it religious, be it social. If you're prohibiting social gatherings, why allow political ones? Ask the doctor on the panel. Dr. Sanjay Singh, come in here. Are electoral reforms needed then? Can rallies be made virtual? Will opposition parties accept it? Will the ruling party accept it? What should be done with the upcoming elections? Dr. Sanjay Singh, come in here.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The political party organized the rallies virtual. This is the very good sign. All the panelists very well discussed about the precautions of COVID. During the election, every voter has very much worried about the COVID pandemic. But election during the political parties election campaign, they are not very much careful this type of the precautions. So I have requested all the political parties that they follow the protocol of COVID during election. This is my humble request in all the political parties, and also I have made to election commission, and I will request to you that they follow in COVID protocol. Yeah.
Okay. No, but fair point, Dr. Sanjay Singh. But as far as, of course, now the upcoming elections are concerned, do you believe that all political parties will accept this? Do you believe they will be okay with delaying the elections, or will one party be concerned as to whether delay will impact them politically, electorally or not? Also, Dr. Sanjay Singh, virtual campaigns, are they feasible? Are they practical? Or is it going to provide an unfair level playing field?
Yeah. Last 3 days is the this debate is very much high because of after in High Court decision in Allahabad High Court. So because of political parties, I am coming from UP. So UP is the more important in coming assembly election. So all political parties has yesterday meet to an election commission, and they request to UK election in on time. So basically, this is a decision of election commission. But as per my opinion, as a reformer.
Okay, I think we've lost you there, Sanjay Singh. Kabir Srivastav, come in here on the courts stepping in as well. Before I ask you on the constitutional question on the elections, what's your take on the court stepping in now? The Allahabad High Court having some very stringent observations the other day, because of which now we've seen, of course, the EC at work meet with officials in Uttarakhand. They're now in UP. They also held deliberations with the Health Secretary a couple of days ago. Do you believe that if the Election Commission does not delay the polls or take some concrete actions, the courts could intervene? Either the High Court, which has already spoken out on this matter, or the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
I don't believe so, because the rights of the Election Commission are for suspension of an election is very limited in the Constitution. In fact, it can only be done if there is a promulgation of emergency. And as everybody knows, emergency cannot be promulgated unless there is armed rebellion or something of this nature, or there is a war. Pandemic does not qualify as one of the tests under which proclamation of emergency can be done. So basic argument does not hold good that Election Commission the Executive Office doesn't have that power anyway. But the Election Commission also does not have that power unless that notification for election is issued. Once the notification is issued under the Representation of People's Act, then there are some provisions under which it can be postponed, and it has been done in the past, such as when Rajiv Gandhi's assassination took place in about 30 years ago, and some situations of this nature have happened. And also it happens when, let's say, there has been in certain assemblies, elections can be postponed. But all of this can only kick in once the notification for election has been issued, which I don't believe has yet been issued. So the time limit also that they have is very short, because they have to reconstitute a new assembly before the 5th year expiration of the assembly that's outgoing. And I believe that's 17th or 18th of March 2022.
Okay. But Kabir, as far as, of course, then, as you're saying, there is a precedence. It's happened before.
Yeah.
But in that scenario, would President's rule then continue? Would that swing in Uttar Pradesh until the elections are held? And is there any sort of timeline? Is it under 6 months by when it should happen? Because the term of the assembly ends in May. So anything beyond that, perhaps you'll need, a special sort of proclamation by the President of India or something of that nature. But perhaps a 1 month postponement could happen even without that, because the term of the assembly only ends in May. The elections currently are being considered in February, March. Perhaps they can be put off. until March, April. So at least a 1 month sort of delay is feasible without even any sort of proclamation, isn't it?
So my briefing was that it was in March that the term was expiring. But if it's expiring in
May, yes.
Okay. If
to
it's
the best of my
expiring
knowledge,
in May, then the Election Commission has substantial amount of latitude available with itself. The question is that it has to bring back a new assembly before the outgoing. So if it's going in May, then it's got a lot of latitude. And once the election is announced, at that point in time, it also has wide amplitude to keep adjusting the election dates. Insofar as the postponement before the notification, like I said before, it is only possible in case the union government declares or there's a proclamation of emergency. And then there is a time limit of about a year. But that's only if an emergency is declared. And I don't see the pandemic being a reason for declaration of emergency.
Okay. Let's take that back across to the rest of our panel. Sanjay Singh, you making
sorry,
a point?
before concluding, I just want to make one point. It was made by one of your panelists about making voting conditional to vaccination. I believe that is not possible under the Constitution.
Okay, I'm being told that we have to let that be the last comment because we've run out of time. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.